This week's episode of the Run, Eat, Drink podcast is brought to you by listeners like you. Head on over to patreon.com/runeatdrinkpodcast and subscribe today. Fans, founders, and insiders like you help us keep the Run, Eat, Drink podcast going, and we thank you for your support.
I'm Bart Yasso, and you're listening to the Run, Eat, Drink podcast.
Welcome to the Run, Eat, Drink podcast. We feature destination races from across the country. And after the race, we take you on a tour of the best local food and beverage to celebrate. So whether you are an elite runner or a back of the packer like us, you'll know the best places to accomplish, explore, and indulge on your next runcation. Hey, welcome to episode 154 of the Run, Eat, Drink podcast. I'm your host, Amy.
And I am your co-host, Dana.
Welcome to this extremely exciting show.
You're beaming.
I am.
This only happens when we have extra special guests. She doesn't have this reaction just talking to me, just so you guys know.
Well, I love you.
But
I am married to you. I have been fortunate enough to live with you every day in wedded bliss for over 2 decades. And today we're talking to Bart Yasso.
to Bart freaking Yasso.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
We got Bart Yasso.
Yes.
We've been talking about this for quite a while, and I'm just as excited as you are.
We are sharing his wisdom over not 1, not 2, but count them, 3 episodes.
This is true. Amy's grinning ear to ear and just...
I could listen to it 1,000,000 times over. He just is a natural storyteller, an inspiring storyteller, a motivator, because you'll hear about it in the interview, how he got his start running anyway.
Yes.
But, yeah.
We're not gonna give that away.
Then you'll know what I mean.
Yes. So we have an amazing interview coming up on this week's episode with the mayor of running, Bart Yasso. But we are also talking about some healthy food options. We're keeping that trend going.
Yes. Now, last week we were a bit indulgent for Valentine's Day and for the celebration of the Donna Marathon weekend virtual events.
Again, sometimes we got to indulge.
It's about balance.
Yes.
And I think this episode is a perfect example of balance when we come to the eat and drink portions of our show, because from the Run, Eat, Drink podcast test kitchen, we have vegetarian Spanish bean soup.
Yum.
So good.
It's one that it's a recipe that I came up with in honor of a couple of our favorites that we've talked about on the show before.
So we'll get into that.
And then we are celebrating,
as we record this show, February 22nd is National Margarita Day. I think it should be a holiday for everybody away from work to enjoy and indulge in this beverage.
You were combining enjoy and indulge there just now, weren't you?
And enjoy.
So we have a original recipe that is a riff on a margarita that we got once on vacation. And
our experts have been painstakingly for several days
perfecting
this recipe. Our researchers have been hard at work.
We have had the Run, Eat, Drink podcast test kitchens working overtime for this week's episode.
We have.
And we're bringing you a killer pineapple jalapeno margarita.
Excellent.
This week on the show.
Yeah.
Tell me, how are you feeling? Not only are you beaming from the fact that Bart Yasso's on the show this week, you are also coming off of another bout of therapy with Therabeast this morning.
Kristen was very good to me this morning.
Yeah.
Because she's now incorporating football drills.
Oh. Did she get the little speed ladder out for you to do? Oh, boy.
And I was so wobbly and uncoordinated. It was terrible. But it was new and exciting.
Yeah. Keeps it interesting.
Keeps it interesting. I'm sure she was sitting there really trying very hard not to laugh her off.
Amy self-edited, so we wouldn't have to right there. Thank you for that.
Yeah. But
those drills will get better and faster as you go.
She said this is so you can be more agile as you begin to run again. And so that you could sidestep. Oh, she said, oh, here's a stick. You can avoid it.
Right.
And I had just told her the massive story of the huge log on the Anchorage Run Fest half marathon course.
That was a big stick.
Yeah. And how it was there on the way out, but then they had painstakingly removed it on the way in.
They did.
Back into the finish.
That was a first for us, having to climb over an obstacle and then coming back on the back portion of the out and back to find that they had chainsawed it up and gotten it out of the way.
Indeed.
But you mentioned the Anchorage Run Fest.
I did.
That transitions us very nicely. You're like a broadcast professional with kind of a segue.
Trying. No, we have the support of our Runcation Nation, and it makes me feel more professional every day.
Well, we were fortunate enough as professional podcasters who were traveling back when you could travel in 2019 to the Anchorage Run Fest. And that was my first half marathon post-surgery.
Indeed.
I didn't run it. I had to walk the whole thing at the TheraBeast's instruction.
I can't believe you just persistently, you're not going to call her Kristen.
One of our listeners, Josh, was kind enough to give her own hashtag.
That is true.
And I think it was very creative.
A patron of our show, as kind as he is. There it is. Brilliant. Just brilliant.
And she lives up to the name.
It is a testament to how motivating she is.
Oh, she is.
How incredible she is as a doctor to get you back to where you want to be.
Oh, yeah, she's wonderful, but she's a beast.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was my first run.
Yes.
Or race post-surgery.
And her instruction was to walk the whole thing.
I walked the whole thing. But while we were there, we had the distinct honor and pleasure of listening to Bart Yasso.
You can see, when we were at the Anchorage Run Fest, you can see why they call him the mayor of running. He is a running icon, and he doesn't think of himself as the mayor of running, but every day as the chief running officer of Runner's World, he collaborated with race organizers. He traveled to races all around the world, and he brought together other runners, fellow runners. He motivated people. He inspired people. He connected people as part of his career, and he still continues his connection to the running community today.
Yeah, he's very humble when you talk to him, but he is instrumental in the creation of the running community as we know it today, as far as popularizing the sport, as far as democratizing the sport and bringing it to really everybody, regardless of their training level and demographics. And he, like you said, even though he's no longer the chief running officer for Runner's World, he is still hard at work building community at running events and traveling the world doing this. And it's just an incredible testament to an amazing career. And we were fortunate enough to get him for about 90 minutes. But we're going to share with you guys just a portion of the interview today.
Yes. So, as you would say, without further ado, the mayor of running, chief running officer of Runner's World until 2017, an icon, one of our running heroes, and one of the most inspiring runners to the running community, Bart freaking Yasso.
I cannot tell you. I'm so excited, really, for Amy, because she's sitting here beaming as we are about to introduce to you the guest on this week's episode of the Run, Eat, Drink podcast. And she's been teasing this across social media for days.
Well, yes. My palms are even sweaty right now just thinking about it, because today we're joined by the mayor of running, if you will, the chief running officer at Runner's World up to 2017 when he retired, but I don't think this man retires. editor-in-chief at Runner's World, Amby Burfoot, named the Yasso 800s after him. So now you know that we are so lucky and honored to be with Mr. Bart Yasso. Welcome to our show, sir.
Oh, thank you, Amy and Dana. I'm happy to be here.
Yay!
We had the pleasure of meeting Bart almost 2 years ago at the Anchorage Run Fest. It's been too long.
Yeah. Yes, it seems like.
It does seem like a long time ago.
Yes.
And we had the pleasure of hearing Bart talk at pre-race event. And then as we were heading into the finish line.
We were so excited about that. That was so unexpected. Like, we're coming into the half marathon finish of the Anchorage Run Fest. And who do we see running across the street but Bart Yasso? And he looked at us and he said, "Hey, you podcasters." I was so excited. I was like, "Hey, this finish is awesome."
Yeah, right there in downtown Anchorage, of all places.
Beautiful.
It's a small world. You never know who you're going to meet at a running event.
I know. In this year, in this challenging year, this past year, 2020, I'm going to admit that I have listened to your audiobook not once, but twice. My Life on the Run.
My Life on the Run, sure.
Yeah. And I watched your Google talk with the slides. It was a source of motivation and inspiration for me to keep going, despite many races being canceled and going virtual. And I think that your perspective and your experience are so valuable. So we're so lucky to have you on the show. And I want to indulge a little bit and start at the beginning and ask you how you got into running, if you could talk about that for us.
Yeah, sure, Amy. I've been at it, it's almost 44 years, which is crazy. It doesn't seem possible, but I always tell people I really wish I could have taken a selfie of myself when I went out for my first run back in 1977. But as you know, we didn't have selfies in 1977.
No.
Because I looked not like a runner. I had a Budweiser t-shirt, cut off jeans with a belt, tube socks up to my knees. You know, now you could get away with them as compression socks, but they were called tube socks back in the 77. And beat up pair of sneakers, I guess they were. They weren't running shoes. And I went out for that run, convinced I could run 1 mile, just about killed me to run 1 mile. And but that started it all. I wanted a change in my life. I wanted to get in shape. I didn't think I was going to be a runner, like to run races, but I was going to be a runner to get in shape. Start out running a mile because that's a distance that everyone's familiar with, cover 1 mile. And then 1 mile turns into 2 and then 3 and then running 1 day a week to running 5 days a week, just snowballed. And then my older brother, George, who was like my father figure, he challenged me to a race. And I was like, dude, you can't beat me in a race. You can't be serious. And so he challenged me to this 10-kilometer race. And God, he beat me in this race, out-sprinted me at the end. But that really lit the fire that I really wanted to be a runner. And I liked the challenge of the sport. So and my brother George was convinced that I could be a good runner. I wasn't convinced, but he was convinced. So I put my heart and soul into it. And it turned out to be a lifelong commitment to this sport, and ended up being my job. I ended up, running all over the world, doing races on all 7 continents, stuff you just can't. Even in my wildest dreams, I could have never thought where running would take me. And that's why I always use my tagline, never limit where running can take you. Physically, geographically, emotionally, spiritually, it's a powerful sport. And I learned that at a pretty young age into my running, what it's done for me, and made a career out of it. You said I hit the mayor of running. I've been called the mayor of running for like 20 years, and I don't know where that even came from. But I still hear it when I go to events and, do some TV interviews and stuff. They always introduce me as the mayor of running, even though there is no such thing, and I never ran for an office, but it's a fun title, and I love it. If people want to call me the mayor of running, that's cool with me.
It's an appointed position for you.
There you go. But that's how, it just started like that. And I ended up getting a job at Runner's World magazine in 87, worked there 31 years till I retired. And I did have the greatest job at Runner's World. It's everybody wanted to be the chief running officer at Runner's World, but somehow I got it. And, I look back to think that a lot of my work was just to travel around the world and do races and connect with running communities at all corners of the world. It was pretty cool.
Sounds like a good gig if you can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always said. If I were to write my job description, that really was what I did for a living. And I know that doesn't happen all the time. It's pretty rare. And it was an unusual job description too. Like, what is a chief running officer? And, it just seemed the 31 years I was at Runner's World, my job kept evolving mostly to my personality is what I was always told. And they just gave me a long leash and said, go for it. I only retired, and my official retirement date was just 3 years ago. It was like January 15th or 16th. And I pushed it into January. I could have retired in December. I was old enough to retire in December, but I was doing so many media interviews about retirement. I had no clue. Like, I was so used to doing interviews about running, and now I'm doing all these interviews. I was amazed at how many people contact me. And I said, why are you interviewing me about my retirement? They said, you had the greatest job in the world and you loved your job. We want to do a story about it. So I did interviews for a while, and then I thought, okay, I want to go to an event as my last work assignment at Runner's World. So I went to the Bermuda Marathon and, second week in January, and did the whole thing in Bermuda, and then came home and walked out the door. I cleaned up my office, and I was retired. But to be honest, I really retired because of health reasons. It really wasn't.
Yeah.
It was getting hard to travel as much as I used to travel. 40 trips a year it's an arduous. It used to be easy when I was younger, and of course it was a lot easier when you just walked into the airport and get there 20 minutes before the flight takes off and jump on the plane, and as you know, that stuff all changed, and travel just became harder, and it was really hard with my health problems. So I was ready to retire. I could retire, but I never retired from running, and I never retired from the running community and going to a few events. I do. I unfortunately, I can't go to all the events that reach out to me, but I try to go to as many as I can.
So now you just get to pick and choose the ones you really want to go to.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I wish I could go to all of them, but I'm just back in that mode of just wearing myself out on travel. So
you got to enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, that I've been with for years, and I have such a connection with them, and we just have so much fun doing. I do a lot of pre-stuff for them prior to the event, and then race weekend, speak at their dinners and expos, and do race announcing and that kind of stuff, and a lot of media interviews when I'm there, and that's what I love to do. I had my running years, so I'm happy when I show up at a race and do a lot of race festivities, and things that a race really needs.
What would you say your toughest assignment was at Runner's World?
That's a really easy one. When I did the Badwater 146-mile race in 1989, I was only there 2 years, and I'll never forget. I was in this meeting, and the whole staff was there, and we're all talking about this race, the Badwater 146 miles in Death Valley in July, and
nothing about that sounds good, Bart. Just saying.
And no one at Runner's World really knew about this race. And that was the whole meeting was about, okay, there's this tough race. It's brutal and nobody knows about it. So the race director convinced Runner's World that someone from the staff has to do the race. And we're in this meeting, and everyone in the meeting that said, oh, Bart will do it. And, it was like a unanimous vote that Bart's the one to do it. And I thought, okay,
here you go.
Yeah, I'm not going to turn that into a work assignment. So I was doing it. And that was like in February, and the race is in July. Back then they hosted it like the third Wednesday in July, because statistical data showed that was the hottest day of the year in Death Valley. So that if you're going to run a 146-mile race in Death Valley, you got to have it on the hottest day. So it was like a Wednesday that it started. I said, yes, I'll do it. And then kind of forgot about it for like 2 months. And then an editor and one of our promotion people who were going to go with me on the trip, they said, hey, we're going to have a meeting about this and get serious. And I said, I should get serious about training for this thing too. And because I had a lot of marathons under my belt, but I never ran past 26.2 miles. So I thought, I'm going to run 40-mile training runs and 50-mile training runs. I didn't do any of that. I just kept to my marathon training, and then I said, I'll figure it out when I get out there. And,
oh my gosh. I was going to ask you if you had done if you had done any of those ultras like that prior to that. So that answers that question.
Was my first ultra, and I always tell people, do an ultra in your life, but don't do Badwater as your first ultra. Try a 50-kilometer, which is 31 miles. Start there, or 50 miles. Don't start with Badwater. I honestly, even though it was 1989 when I did this race, I could remember it was like yesterday. I literally could feel like it just happened. That race director said, 1 minute to go he had a starter pistol in his hand, and he's like, 1 minute to go to the start of the Badwater 146. And I'm like, wow, I never ran past 26.2 in my life. This race is literally 120 miles longer than I've ever run. And I'm like, wow, maybe I should have thought of that before I got here. You know, this is what's going through my head right at the start. And I just remember like smiling and telling myself, okay, all those miles you've run, this is why you did it. Just go out and enjoy every step of this beautiful place, because Death Valley is a beautiful place. It is crazy hot in the summer, but it's still it's a beautiful scenery. And just, you know, a lot of people look at a desert and say it's dark and there's nothing there. I look at the desert and think it's alive and it's beauty.
Oh, we love the desert Southwest.
Yeah. And that's it was. And back then the finish line was on top of Mount Whitney, which is the highest mountain in the contiguous 48 states, 14,500 feet. So it does get cool at the very end when you're at 14,000 feet. And but you do climb in the last 11 miles. You're on this rugged trail at the top of Whitney. You go from 9,000 feet to 14,500, and then
it's a lot.
Get to the finish. I remember just getting to that finish. And you're at 14,500 feet, and you got this beautiful view of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and you're on the highest peak in the contiguous 48. It's a pretty cool thing. And then the race director shakes your hand and greets you and writes down your time, and then he goes, you better start down, because you can walk 11 miles after you finish to get back to the trailhead, because you're on top of a mountain.
To get to anything.
So can you imagine doing a race and you park your car 11 miles away and say, hey, we're going to run this marathon. And then we're going to, we'll get the car. It's only 11 miles away. But the race is 146 miles, and then you go 11 miles.
Now, the way you just described it, I was like, wow, that sounds incredible. But then I realized you're talking about heat, the desert, altitude. And then I came back to reality and realized that sounds awful.
It was,
and amazing at the same time.
Yeah, it is really hot. I mean, there is no way around it. It is a dry heat in Death Valley, but it is scorching. The afternoons are really hot. It gets crazy. But just pace yourself. Make sure you're taking your fluids. Everyone has to have a crew. And my crew, thank God I had a great crew. They looked over me and made sure I didn't kill myself. My crew, I always say, I had the greatest crew. They took care of me. They did everything correctly except for one thing. When we arrived in Death Valley the day before the race, right about 2:00 in the afternoon, we parked the little RV that we had, and my two colleagues who are my crew, they get out of the RV, and I'm just laying in the back of the RV in the air conditioning, and I hear them out there, and they go, as soon as they open the door, they're like, oh my God, someone's going to die in this race. I know.
Oh, no.
That is not what you want to hear from your crew.
I bang on the side from the inside. I said, I can hear you guys.
That's not motivation. That's not encouragement.
Let's go to dinner before I die tomorrow. And they felt bad. They didn't mean it, that way. But obviously they were kidding around. But they really, that was the first thought that went through their head when they stood in that heat, not even running a step, just standing there.
Wow.
It was quite the work experience. But you know what? It was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me at Runner's World, because after that, they said, this guy, he'll do anything.
You can do anything after that.
Any work assignment nobody wants to do, just send it down to Bart's desk, he'll do it. And that was some of the ways I ended up traveling all over the world, because no one else wanted to go there.
Well, I hope after getting voluntold for that assignment, that they cut you some slack for a little while.
Maybe they let you pick one you wanted to go to.
Yeah, it turned out like that. And when I came home, the whole, not only Runner's World to a party, the whole company that owned Runner's World, that owned a lot of other magazines, a company by the name of Rodale.
Rodale, yeah.
Yeah. They threw a whole party, the whole company. It was really lots of fun. There was a band at the airport when I came home.
Oh, that's
Back
cool.
when people could come out and greet you at the gate.
Sure.
Yes.
I was greeted by a marching band. I remember we didn't have cell phones back then.
Awesome.
We did the old calling cards, and I remember my girlfriend Marty at the time, I told her, I said, all I want to do is just quietly slip back in home and get some sleep. And she knew what was going on. And she said, oh yeah, it'll be real quiet. You don't worry. I come off the plane and there's a marching band there playing. And I'm like, what the heck is a band doing in the airport? And then I realized it was for me. It was crazy.
Oh, that's
But it was so much fun because my whole family met me, and it was pretty cool. But
so
don't do Badwater as your first ultra.
Okay.
I'm going to take that lesson to heart.
Really. But now, if we can ask you, what would you say your favorite race was?
My favorite one is it changes as you go along. I would say, I have a favorite memory in running, and then I have my favorite race.
Oh, my
favorite race is the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. Now, they call it a marathon, but it's actually 56 miles. But they just call it a marathon. South Africans are a hardy group of people. It's a hilly 56 miles, but it's the oldest ultra in the world. It's the largest ultra in the world. I get 24,000 people line up to run 56 miles in South Africa. And it's been run every year since 1921. I guess they did a virtual thing last year.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. When apartheid was abolished in the mid-90s in South Africa, the country really flourished. We launched Runner's World South Africa. Mm-hmm. I believe our launch was in 1993. And so I was excited to go to Comrades. And then after Badwater, I did a couple more ultras. And I got pretty fast in the 50-mile range. So I was, all excited. I got my personal best for 50 miles is just over, I didn't break 6 hours. I was like 11 seconds breaking 6 hours. So it's like a pace like 7:20 per mile pace for 50 miles. Oh. Now I can't do 1 mile that fast, but I could do 50 at that pace. But anyway, so I was convinced I could do Comrades and be in the top 50, say, something like that, with the times I could run for 50 miles. And so I got all excited, entered a race, and I ended up getting sick, and I never got to South Africa. And then I entered again and got sick. I had problems with Lyme disease that really messed me up. And I really gave up on doing Comrades. And then when I wrote the book, My Life on the Run, I ended it saying my only regret in running is I've never got to do Comrades. So I went over in 2010. I was not in good shape and I wasn't healthy, but I was convinced I could do it. And I made it because they closed their finish line at 12 hours. And if you don't get there, they don't let you cross the finish line. So I made it with like a half hour to spare and was in pretty bad shape. But I'll never forget, there was a marathoner by the name of Willie Matolo, and he won the New York City Marathon. And I was so impressed that he could win the New York City Marathon because he was a black South African runner. And it was not easy to be a black South African during apartheid. I mean, they really thought their life was threatened all the time. So how do you go out and just run 20-mile, 22-mile long runs and run free? Because they felt they couldn't do it. And I thought, this guy, I mean, living in apartheid, and he can come into New York City and win the New York City Marathon. I was so impressed by him. And when I finish comrades, I'm hanging at the finish, and the race director made sure I got to see the finish when they stop it at 12 hours. So they shuttled me to this finish area, and I feel this tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and there's a tall, lean, black South African looking guy. And I look at him and I'm like, wow, that's Willie Matolo. And he says, Bart, congrats on comrade. He gives me a big hug. And I was like, man, if I could have picked someone to greet me at the finish line, it would have been Willie Matolo. And he was there. I mean, I didn't realize that the race brings him in and he does some stuff at the finish. I had no clue. But he gave me a big hug, and that was, oh my God, it was unbelievable.
What a wonderful really surprise.
Yeah. But my favorite running memory, I always say running the Rome Marathon is also one of my favorite races because you get the whole tour of the city of Rome. Oh. But I didn't realize it at the time. I stopped doing the race, and I wasn't, at that point in my career, I was still running fast at some races, but I would also go to some races and just enjoy myself. And that was one of the races because my mom came along. So remember, like 5 miles in the race, come up on Trevi Fountain, and there's my mom. So I stop, and my mom's looking at me. She goes, the race is going on. You got to keep running. I'm like, Mom, it's okay. I stop, and I have my picture with her. And then I saw her at mile 20 at the Spanish Steps, stopped again, got another picture. And that's, after my mom passed away, it is by far my favorite running memory. I got this great picture of me and my mom with Trevi Fountain in the backdrop, and I got bib number on, and really cool. But, at the time, to me, it was a really cool picture with my mom that I really loved. But, as someone passes on, and the sentiment and the value of that photo means everything to me. And it's by far my favorite running memory.
The experience is more than just the race itself.
Yeah. And when I went to Comrades in South Africa, I sponsored 2 South African children through a program called World Vision. And I ran for World Vision in the race, and I got to meet my 2 sponsored children. You always get these pictures of them, and they send you these little notes that somebody works with them to write you a nice thank you note for sponsoring them. And, but I actually got to meet these 2 kids. It was unbelievable. And then World Vision had the kids out on the course, and I came along at like mile 4. They were at like mile 40, coming along all sweated and beat up, and that. All of a sudden I see this kid running towards me, and I realize it's my sponsored child, gives me a big hug, and then I run a little bit more, and then there's my other sponsored child. He gives me a big hug. It was really cool. That's the stuff that, in the end, when you do this stuff, as long as I've done it and you look back, that's the stuff that's memorable. I was fortunate enough to win races at one point in my career, but it's not my favorite memories. It's not what means the most to me. It's really the connections with people and things like that. It's priceless to meet your sponsored children along the Comrades Marathon course. It was unbelievable.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool stuff. I didn't say to my mom, go to Trevi Fountain and go to the Spanish Steps. She just did it. Yeah. She was a great spot to get a photo. And it was pretty cool. And it was a big trip for my mom because she was devout Catholic, and she got to go to the Vatican and hang out with the Pope, do an audience with the Pope. It was a big group that got to do an audience with the Pope, but it was cool. And I made sure she flew Air France, because then she stopped in Paris, and she went to Notre Dame and went to mass there, and then went to the Vatican. So she was it was a life-changing trip for her.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yeah, she passed away about 7 years later. But she talked about it every time. Every time I would get together with her, she would talk about that trip.
Experiences.
Hanging out with the Pope, yeah, she always called it like hanging out with the Pope.
Hanging out with the Pope.
It was pretty cool.
Yes. Memories you can't take away. They'll always be there, and
And thanks to running.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just hit it. That's exactly. It's like running was a vehicle that made that happen. And, if I didn't take up running, that probably would have never happened. So just a little extra benefits that you can't, when you're out there training, you can't think, oh, I'm going to meet my mom at the Trevi someday. Like, the stuff just happens if you invest yourself in the sport and invest yourself in the running community and get out there and do this stuff. Good things come your way.
What would you say to somebody who's out there and who is a lot of the people who are a part of our community? They're like, we're thinking about getting into running and we're not sure that we can do it. What would be your advice for somebody who wants to start running for the first time?
Yeah, you just have to start. You got to make that commitment that you're going to start. And then you just start really easy, just run to a telephone pole or a house and then walk. And then, and eventually you just get better at it. And then I always tell people, once you feel like you can run a couple miles, then you do a group run. I convince people either going to a running store or a running club and doing a group run. And once they get that far, it's over. Because then they meet someone and this person says, oh, I did this race and that race, and you got to hang out with me and we'll train together. And
you have to do this. You have to go there.
Yeah. You don't know how crazy and fun the running community is and inspiring all in one until you're immersed in it. And then, I always said every day I walked into my office at Runner's World, I said this to myself. Every day when I walked into my office, I got to convince someone today that's not a runner to be a runner, or a group of people. And that wasn't on my job description, but I always did that. It was my little personal thing. You work at Runner's World magazine, we got to always, yeah. So I would always figure out crazy ways to, connect with somebody and figure out that they should be a runner. And I always felt like all I had to do is get that person or group of people out, just moving, get them going. Once they go to that group run or that first race, it's over. The running community takes off, takes care of these people, and I just take a step back and don't need to do a thing. And then you don't know that from the outside. I mean, I'm sure people look at us like, wow, boy, these people look like they're hurting themselves. They're not going to have any knees in another year. That's the perception that a lot of people have. Yeah, and it's wrong because it's not true. But I run with like a pained look on my face. I should be out there smiling more. But I always say the difference of a kid when you go to kids races, kids smile the whole time they run. Yeah. 3 kids that live right down the street from me, and they run by my house. They run in my backyard. I have to time them. They run around my yard, and they smile the whole time they run. And then the adults show up, and we have like a frown when we run. And it's just, so I think people think that we're not having fun, but little do they know how much we enjoy it. And once you do one of those group runs, and I'll never forget first time I did a long run with just a small group, like 2 or 3 other guys. It's like, I realized we were already at like 18 miles. And I thought, I thought we were at like mile 3. And it was so different because I did every run alone in the old days. And, and when I do 23-mile runs, occasionally I would see another runner out on these country roads and go, oh my God, there's somebody else out here running. And then I would look at them and I go, oh my God, they're a serious runner. They got a shirt on that says marathon or some race. And then the other thing everyone had back in the 70s, early 80s, we had these Casio watches that cost $9.99, but it had a chrono on it that we could time our runs and splits and everything. And it was really cool. And if somebody if they had that watch and they had running shoes on and they had a race shirt, you knew, wow, this person's serious. But it was rare to see people. And now it's so different. There's so many runners out there, but it was just a different world. But the sport changed in so many ways. And once the amount of women that do the sport, very rare to have women at races. In fact, they were discouraged to do races and told
long time,
not to do races. I feel so lucky that I watched that growth. People, a lot of runners say to me, they're jealous. They say, oh my God, you've been doing this 40, whatever plus years. And I say, well, you know what? You're only been at it 2 years, but you came in at the right time when there's so many people and there's so many races and there's group runs and social. That stuff didn't exist in the old days. So I always say, I always tell people that started the sport recently, I'm jealous of them because they came in at a really good time when the sport is really flourishing, except obviously for the pandemic. But outside of that, the sport really has taken off and it's gotten so much more inclusive, and it's really been a real joy to physically witness that.
You said at the start of the whole interview, as we were introducing the interview, that he's so humble. Bart is so humble. Mm-hmm. And he is. Even at the tail end of this part of the interview, he's talking about how he feels so fortunate and so lucky to have seen the birth of the running community, and how social media and running groups and women and their advancement of the sport. He says he feels so lucky to have seen those advancements in running.
Yeah. And in saying that, I don't believe that he's being, falsely humble.
No.
But he doesn't go, and I did that. He isn't like that. But that wouldn't have happened without him and his influence and his work at building community and building interest and motivating and inspiring people like you talked about.
He is just one of the running icons that has had such a hand in that.
Yeah.
And he's just, I was so nervous prior to our interview, and he made it so easy.
He really did.
And just like having a conversation about so many running memories. If you're sitting down to dinner and you close down a restaurant.
And that's exactly the way that interview felt.
Yeah.
And when we were interviewing him, when it came to the end of our scheduled time, we told him, we're like, hey, we want to be, respectful of your time. Mm-hmm. And he goes, no, I'm good. And
it was amazing.
We just kept going and talking until the conversation really came to an organic close. He was just wonderful to talk to. And we're going to have more of that interview for you guys in the coming weeks.
Yes.
So stay tuned for that.
And really, again, Bart Yasso, you're amazing.
So let's talk food.
Yeah. So listen, you remember the very first episode of the Run Eat Drink podcast.
Way back when we were still a video podcast. I do remember that.
A video podcast. So if you go back and you look at our very first episode, then you can see us try the Colombia's Spanish bean soup.
Yeah, this is a dish that I actually ate quite a bit of growing up as a kid, both at the Columbia restaurant in Tampa, in Ybor City, as well as at home. My mom would make Spanish bean soup inspired by the Columbia restaurant at home on a very regular basis.
You've never told me this, so this is yet again a moment where, as we record the show, I learned something new about you.
Yeah, this for me is a nod to my mom and a nod to one of my favorite places that I would eat growing up and that you and I enjoy to this day. And
there are so many memories tied to your childhood, our dating life, and our friendship. And the podcast, Richard Gonsmart and his family.
And the staff at the restaurants.
And everybody. We had Michael Kilgore on the show at the end of November. And that entire restaurant group is like family, and they know how to create memories.
Oh, they absolutely do. And this recipe is one of those things. It is so simple, but it is so flavorful and so warming and satisfying. I wanted to be able to bring this recipe home, and growing up with my mom making it, I'm familiar with it, but I also, because of the way we eat when we're training, I wanted to make a version of this that we could have when we are eating our normal 6 days a week of vegan or vegetarian.
Yes.
And I started experimenting in the kitchen to do that.
And this has been the time of year when we could experience things like we had the vegetarian vegan chili a few weeks ago in our recipe on the show. And this cooler weather that we've had over this last weekend, it makes me happy.
She loves the bell.
Now he's taking the bell away. So, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were fortunate enough down here in Florida. We had cooler
weather.
We didn't have cold weather like friends of ours across the country.
There have been a select few days this winter season where Florida has decided to participate in winter.
Just a little bit.
Just a tad, not as much as some of our friends up north. And I can tell you that our hearts and our thoughts are with the people in Texas right now.
Absolutely.
And hoping for them to get through that difficult time that we can perfectly well relate to when it comes to hurricanes and tornadoes hitting our area.
And being without power for days at a time.
Yeah. So the harsh weather that everybody is experiencing, we got only a minute degree of that.
Yeah, just enough to cool things off down here. But that cooler weather in Florida gives us excuses to not only go to the closet and get out maybe the one piece of winter wear you held on to when you moved down here,
right?
But also to get out the recipe book and start going for things like soups and stews and chilies.
Exactly.
And this recipe, Spanish bean soup, being just a rich, hearty broth, and it's filled with things like potatoes and garbanzo beans and onion. And it is just this amazingly flavorful, simple recipe.
And I would say the version at the restaurant has chorizo.
The version at the restaurant has chorizo.
Ours,
Some places also will do some pork butt or pork shoulder.
Oh, yes. Ours does not. Ours is what we share with you in the show notes this week and what we're talking about now. These are all the elements to create the vegan vegetarian version, and it becomes so flavorful because of the warming spices that you use.
The real secret to this is giving it a nice base of flavor. The recipe that is in the show notes is the one that we made here at home. This can all be done in a slow cooker. It can be done in an Instant Pot. You could do this in a regular, like just a regular pot or Dutch oven on the stove as well.
Depending on what you have in the house.
Yeah, but you're talking about a very simple base of beans. And for our purposes, we use dry garbanzo beans.
Because we want to limit sodium.
We're limiting sodium, and also they're very inexpensive.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If you have
That's true.
a pressure cooker, that is a great way to save some money because you're talking a fraction of the cost for dry beans, and you can go from dry beans to ready to eat in an hour.
It's awesome.
Which is not normally, if you're cooking through traditional methods, you're going to have to soak those overnight.
But you can still do it.
Oh,
you can
yeah.
still do it on the stovetop if you soak them overnight, and you can let it go on the stovetop and create that slow cook.
Oh, yeah.
Flavor.
Absolutely. This is the recipe combines things like diced white potatoes, which give you just this great heartiness. You have the dry garbanzo beans, which when they cook, they have this almost meaty texture. And garbanzos are so versatile. We use them all the time.
Yeah.
We make hummus all the time. We've done falafel, like baked falafel before.
They're very filling in whatever configuration we have ever used them.
And if you are doing, like, say, a meatless Monday, or if you're eating vegetarian, vegan, they're a fantastic protein source. So that's
boom,
great option for you right there.
We were just talking about that in the coffee chat this morning. Greg in Orlando that we follow on Instagram. He has another account, Vegan at the Parks.
Yeah.
And he posts all sorts of vegan options from the parks and from area restaurants in Orlando.
Oh, I can't wait to hook up with him and talk some vegan options for people doing the vacation up there.
Yeah. I mentioned that we had this recipe, and he says, hey, as long as it's a good protein source, yeah, I'm in.
Well, so what's giving you the meat and potatoes, quote unquote, without the meat, is the garbanzo beans and the potatoes. But what's giving you a lot of the flavor is the broth that you're creating. And you're doing that with diced white onion, diced carrot, diced celery, diced jalapeno, and this is where you get all the control.
Oh, in terms of what you put.
In terms of what you put in. We've got the recipe in the show notes, but you can choose to leave your seeds and the membrane inside of that pepper in for a little more spice, or not.
Or you could totally switch out the jalapeno for a bell pepper.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is totally up to you. But then you're also adding in the two ingredients that are really the secret sauce here. The diced minced fresh garlic, which even if you're making a recipe that's a recipe for how to cook 1 clove of garlic, you need to use
more than one.
You always need more.
Yes.
But the secret ingredient, which closely replicates the flavor of the chorizo, is smoked paprika. This is something... if you don't have it in your pantry,
get it, because it's different from regular paprika.
Totally different.
Yeah,
and you don't want to accidentally swap the two.
It's
in any recipe.
It's a warmer flavor.
Yeah,
than it's a little bit of more of a bite when it comes to the paprika that's not smoked.
But it's not hot.
No.
A lot of people confuse this for hot paprika or sweet paprika. And those are, you got hot, sweet, and smoked. And the three of those are totally different other than their color.
Yeah.
They're all red.
So you just have to pay attention to the packaging that you're getting.
Exactly. So you get the smoked paprika.
But I also think that warm quality in the broth is also brought to you by the liquid aminos that you use.
And we use the liquid aminos, and you can get several varieties at your local store. Again, if you are not a person that keeps liquid aminos in the house, this is where your salt would come into play, or soy sauce. That it's either or.
Right.
We don't add salt, so we add liquid aminos. That gives us a little salty hit, but keeps the sodium down.
Yeah.
And then I did something a little different.
I would say before you talk about what's a little different, you used water in terms of the liquid.
I did, and this is you could go either way. It just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to do a richer broth, you were going to suggest another secret.
You were wanting to do a richer broth, but still staying in the whole low sodium and low and vegan vegetarian
realm.
Yes. Then you can use low sodium vegetable broth.
Oh yeah. Which we have in the pantry. And truth be told, when I was making this batch, I just forgot that we had it in the pantry.
But it's still flavorful either way. Just side note. But you could also, if you were planning on adding legit chorizo or some other meat, like ham, like you said, then you could use chicken or beef stock.
I was going to say, I would actually if I were going to do this as a non-vegetarian or vegan option, I would go ahead and do chicken broth as the base for the liquid. And I would add in either diced pork shoulder or pork butt, and then also a couple of links of chorizo sliced.
Yeah.
And throw that in.
But
you could totally do that. Now you're basically getting to the direct analog of either the Colombia's Spanish bean soup, or you're getting very close to the soup from one of our favorites up in Orlando.
We haven't even covered on the show yet.
Yeah, Cafe Tutu Tango has a
great
soup there, or I believe that.
I hope they still do.
They still do. It's called the Sopa de Leon.
De Leon.
Which is a Spanish bean soup with pork.
I tried with the accent, it didn't work. Okay, but still, that place, we need to get up there and we need to cover that.
I agree.
For the show, because there are many amazing dishes there, and that is just one of them.
Yes. But then I went a different direction, and I wanted to add something else to give it a little more heartiness, a little something else, and that was chopped kale. I added in chopped kale in this recipe and gave us a little green element into the bean soup. It's so hearty you could call it a stew almost.
You could. And it also depends on, it would become more stew-like if we were talking about white potatoes, but if you used Yukon Golds, then they might disintegrate a little bit more into the broth.
Yes.
And create a heartier broth.
Agreed.
Like it makes it become a stew. Yeah.
We made this, it takes about an hour in a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Hour and 20 minutes. Actually, about an hour and 20 minutes total. And it is just an amazingly flavorful dish. It's super filling. We had it tonight before recording.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact.
So good.
And I think that this is a fantastic nod to two restaurants that we love and try to frequent as often as we can.
We have talked about the Columbia on several episodes, but if you want to see the Spanish bean soup, go back to our very first episode.
Yes.
You can have a good laugh at me.
Pull it up in a podcatcher that will play video because that's a video episode.
Or you could still get it over on our YouTube channel.
Or right on our website. Yeah.
And just see that video, and so you can actually see the Spanish bean soup from the Columbia.
And theirs is not vegetarian, by the way.
No. So that you can see. I think it's good that we have our recipe in the show notes, and then we also have the example of the hearty meat version.
Yes.
Not vegetarian version.
Now, as somebody who's eaten both,
as a visual,
what do you think? Is it a pretty good approximation?
It's that the broth is warm. It feels like home. Either one. I love them both. The chorizo is amazing and adds that kind of fattiness.
It's hard to compete with chorizo.
That buttery fattiness. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I feel about it.
Sure.
And I have so many positive associative memories with having that soup. At the Ybor City location, at the Kissimmee location, at the Riverwalk location.
We've basically eaten that soup at every locations we've gone to.
Yeah. The only one we haven't hit is St. Augustine.
And we'll get the soup when we go there.
Yeah. And now you know where all the locations are. So we highly recommend this vegetarian version. It's very hearty. It's very filling. It's very satisfying, full of protein. And there are, as we have talked about the ingredients, several different ways to vary it up if you're not going vegetarian.
Now, think of it this way. You're not wanting to do it vegetarian? Awesome. The recipe we provided you is a great base.
And you can play with it.
And add your protein. But check it out. Yeah. If you make it, we would love for you to take a photo.
And tag us.
And send it to us or tag us. Either way, I think you're going to be very happy with it. This is a recipe that we make... Gosh, at home, we probably make this at least 5 times a year, 6 times a year.
I would say more than that.
At least.
Yeah.
I mean, it's every few weeks.
It may not be a summer recipe.
No, we've gone through a few crock pots or Instant Pots full of this already.
Yeah.
So we're fans. We hope that you're going to be fans as well.
And the directions are super easy and also in the show notes.
Phenomenal.
Yay.
But before we go on,
we just want to say thank you to all of our patrons for your support and the growth you've allowed us to achieve, especially in 2020 and early 2021.
All of our patrons help our show so much. Your contribution each month helps us continue to bring our Runcation Nation a great show as we head into 2021.
And hopefully you like the changes we've made to the studio because of your help. We've been able to keep bringing you the show despite the challenges of being a Runcation podcast and so many live races going virtual.
And not being able to travel.
Being canceled and not being able to travel. So we are so grateful to all of you who are already patrons, those who have upgraded their pledges recently. And at patreon.com/runeatdrinkpodcast, we have 3 different levels. We have a $2, $5, and $10 level, and they all have their own special perks that we continue to expand upon in 2021.
Patrons get special thank you messages from us, plus bonus audio podcasts that'll be coming up later in 2021.
Insiders get a look behind the scenes, get access to video footage of special interviews, maybe like the one we had today. cooking demos from the Run, Eat, Drink podcast test kitchen, and exclusive tastings of our favorite foods and beverages that we might not have had time to cover on the show. Bonus!
In fact, one of the perks for all of our patrons is that we also give you a special birthday shout out. Kristen Sinaviva Iovine, fan of our show, just celebrated her birthday this past Saturday.
Indeed.
We don't say how many. We just honor and celebrate your birthday on our episode and social media. Happy birthday, Kristen.
Happy birthday, Kristen. We share your love of running, Disney, and coffee. We hope you had a great one. And as Dana says, 21 looks good on you.
Absolutely. I was going to say, if you're listening, know that we're still celebrating your birthday.
That's right.
We hope it was a great one. And listen, if you're not a patron already, we hope you'll visit patreon.com/runeatdrinkpodcast, learn more, and become a patron today.
And as always, our show will be free. And we thank all of you for your support of the Run, Eat, Drink podcast.
Let's talk drinks.
Oh, yes.
She told me that there was a holiday coming up, and I'm like, what's the holiday?
Well, I mean, okay, so
there's a national day for everything.
It's a national day. It's not really a holiday because nobody really had the day off for it, but
they should.
Unless they strategically planned to have the day off and requested it, or were just happened to be off, then you could celebrate National Margarita Day, which is February 22nd. Yes. So as of this recording, we're recording on that day.
We are.
So. And
we decided that we were going to do an homage or an homage. We're going to pay tribute to some amazing margaritas that we've had in the past. And I think that we've talked margaritas on the show.
Oh, speaking of Disney, because this past weekend would have been the Princess Half Marathon weekend, and we saw many of our patrons, friends, and supporters of the show, members of the Runcation Nation, achieving their virtuals. Their challenges, 19.3,
awesome.
13.1, 3.1, 6.2, all the things, all the miles, 5K, 10K, half, challenge, whatever. You know what I'm saying to you.
I do.
Congratulations to you all. You made us think about episode 26 when we had the Rose Margarita in Mexico. And that was actually at the Flower and Garden
I was going to say, to be clear, the Mexico Pavilion at the Epcot Food and Wine or Flower and Garden?
Flower and Garden.
Flower and Garden.
Flower and Garden, yes. So those are the two, most successful or longest running? Well, I don't want to say most successful because Festival of the Arts we really haven't experienced.
And it seems to be really picking up in terms of popularity.
And just beautiful.
But those two festivals are very big draws. People love them.
Yeah. And
we love them.
I really don't think we have talked about it. We didn't talk about it on the episode proper, but when it comes to Poppy's Mexican Restaurant in Lexington, Kentucky, we talked about the food from there in episode 56. We had a quick bite that was an interview with Marcos Valdez, who is the owner.
Yes.
The margarita there
was killer.
It was the one that yesterday I used, or today, the 22nd, or if you're hearing this on Tuesday, yesterday. I can't keep the day straight. You know what I mean.
Recording, time shifting, it's difficult.
It's
like time travel.
It is. Today's post for National Margarita Day shows you toasting with a Poppy's margarita.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not normally a margarita guy.
No, you don't like the sweeter. You've never been a dessert guy, and you always talked about that on the show.
Yeah, but Poppy's, I tasted it, and I was like, ooh, yeah, I'll have one of these. And
yum, yum, yum.
The margarita was phenomenal, and Marcos was just an amazing guy to talk to, and I cannot wait to get back there.
Me too.
So
I hear that Run the Bluegrass is actually happening live at the end of March. I'm just saying to you.
If you get cleared for that much hill work between now and the end of March.
Probably not, but I'm just saying it as a tip for some people because we're looking at you, the Will Run For podcast. We know one of your hosts has it on the bucket list.
It is quite the race.
It's the prettiest half marathon in the country. Also the hilliest.
or one of the hilliest.
And nearby poppies.
Yes.
So external motivator.
So taking some of the motivation from margaritas we've had in the past, we decided to do another fantastic recipe for you guys that we perfected over many hours in the Run, Eat, Drink podcast test kitchens.
Yes, our researchers were hard at work. All weekend long, perfecting the recipe.
And the inspiration actually comes mostly, all of these margaritas that we've had gave us some great inspiration in terms of the proportions, but the actual flavor profile came from a bar at Coronado Springs Resort in Walt Disney World that served a Chipotle pineapple margarita.
Yes, we looked everywhere for that mix.
I could not
at the time
get my hands on that Chipotle syrup, and to this day it just kills me that I can't. I think the company that made it at the time has stopped making it.
You think so?
I think so, because I don't see any listings of it.
Disappointing.
Because I actually talked to the bartender to get info on that one. So
didn't the bartender actually show you
showed me the bottle
of the mix? Yeah.
So I wanted to do something that was a nod to that. So we ended up going with a pineapple jalapeno margarita here at home, and we did a lot of refining, and we did some things that were a little bit bespoke, purpose made for this cocktail. And when you look at the recipe, which is in the show notes,
it is.
And if you're listening, we also on the social media post in Facebook in our show notes there, you're going to be able to see the recipe. We actually take the time to make our very own jalapeno simple syrup.
Yes, we do.
Which imparts great sweetness. And what you thought was just a really interesting twist to it.
I thought because you had left the veins, the ribs of the pepper, all of the seeds, everything.
I did.
Yeah.
I got dangerous.
Washed it, chopped it, just kept it in that simple syrup steeping. I thought we were going to have spice.
Yeah.
Really, we just had the waxy flavor of the jalapeno.
Yeah.
What would happen if we had used Chipotles? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, well, you could get dried Chipotles and maybe do it that way.
But would you get the heat? What if...
You might, depending on the pepper.
I guess.
The one thing about peppers, and we've had this even in cooking at home, forget drinks for a second. We'll make tacos some nights.
Yeah.
And some nights we'll live dangerously and just do sliced jalapeno, and we won't de-seed. And some nights you get one and you're like, it's like a bell pepper, not much to it. And then other nights you get one and it wanted to be a habanero when it grew up. So,
it's angry that it wasn't a habanero.
Very angry. And it gets your attention. So I don't know if it was necessarily the cooking process that mellowed this out or the fact that it was in so much sugar, because basically it's simple syrup is 1 part sugar, 1 part water, but it was a very mellow,
waxy flavor.
You got the the flavor of the pepper, but the heat from this drink, even with the muddling of the jalapeno,
with the seeds and the ribs,
still wasn't blowing doors off, and we weren't trying for that.
Would you have to leave it in? Would you have to combine all these ingredients, the silver tequila, the Cointreau, the pineapple juice, the lime juice, and the sliced jalapeno and muddle that together and then leave it sit to impart some of that? Or maybe we just had a batch of jalapenos that were like, meh, we don't want to be spicy.
I would say that if you're making this drink at home, I would probably pre-test your jalapeno.
Somebody who is really... a spice head
maybe
could try it.
Let you know if this is a real hot pepper or not.
Yeah. So,
here's the thing. If you want to make this and you're just really scared of it, you can always leave the jalapeno out.
Yeah, we were just trying to balance. There's the pineapple juice, and the pineapple juice is really sweet.
Yes.
And the jalapeno, it's like a yin and a yang of the drink.
Yeah, this drink does a great job. The silver tequila is nice and smooth. And again, that will vary depending on which brand you choose. For our purposes, we were using Milagro here at home, but whatever your favorite silver tequila for mixing,
whatever you choose.
A little bit of Cointreau, which gives you the orange flavor, and that citrus offsets the pineapple a little bit. They play well together, but the lime juice is actually probably one of the most important ingredients in this.
I would say yes, because it cuts through the sweetness of the pineapple juice.
Yep.
And it's like the salt and pepper of this cocktail.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah. So tequila, Cointreau, pineapple juice, lime juice, sliced fresh jalapenos for muddling, and the jalapeno simple syrup. And
now
voila.
This is a very easy recipe. You can get as adventurous as you'd like. When you make it as directed, you end up with this wonderfully balanced margarita that I don't think does much more than just give you a little tingle on your lips.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And a little gradual warming in your mouth without blowing your doors off.
And could you do a rim? We didn't talk about doing any kind of salt rim or spiced salt rim, but could you do that? Sure, you could.
Oh, yeah. And I played with that a little bit. I don't know that you have to. And I would say do what you like. If you like a salt rim, go for it. Because again, that would add another element of the tradition to the beverage, of course.
Yeah.
And that saltiness combined with the sweetness and the tartness, that I think would be a great
You're
great
hitting
way to
all the different notes.
balance this cocktail out.
Yeah.
You could also do something like a tahini spice.
Oh, I love that. We've seen that a lot from a local taco truck, Death by Taco.
As a spice on food, we've also seen it used at La Cava del Tequila in Epcot.
Disney, yes, at Epcot, yes. And we've also seen it at, what is that, Inner Space Brewing in Huntsville, Alabama?
Yes.
Yeah, because they had chips and queso with that seasoning.
Yep.
As you're having your flights of beer and things like that.
So that would give you a tart, spicy, salty option to rim your glass with as well.
Yes.
So there's some great things for you guys to play with this drink. The recipe, as written, will not blow your doors off.
Yes, have no fear.
Give it a
Spice is
try.
not really here. It's just levels of flavor.
Yeah, that's our goal. Because we know not everybody's a chili head. I am.
I think this recipe is very flexible.
Yes.
You could do it, or you could.
Would you have me make it again?
I would. Yes. And I think we could play with a different batch of jalapeno, or we could step it up.
Oh.
And we could try maybe habaneros in the simple syrup and see if it's just the process of making the simple syrup, or it's the pepper itself, or there's more homework for the Run, Eat, Drink podcast test kitchen chef.
Oh. Okay.
Which is Dana. So.
The secret's out.
Craft services chef, technical support. He does it all. This podcast wouldn't exist without him or...
Let's not go that far.
All the members of our Runcation Nation that support us.
Absolutely.
So
try that recipe. Let us know what you think. We think it looks and tastes fantastic. If you make it, take a photo, tag us, email it to us at info@runeatdrink.net and show us your concoctions from your own test kitchen.
You could even send us a little memo, a little voice memo from your phone.
Yes.
And you could attach it to that email, info@runeatdrink.net. And then you could just become Run, Eat, Drink podcast famous.
I love it. So next week, we are going to have more from Bart Yasso. So stay tuned for that.
Yay!
He has a wealth of advice and stories and wisdom from his experience, and that is yet to come.
This week, we would really appreciate it if you would head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and review. It's reviews like yours and like the ones that we have recently received that help us get discovered in the podcast community. This, we think we know who it is, but the nicknames that are posted with the reviews don't reveal who they are exactly. But this, the title of this one is Like Listening to Friends. Amy and Dana are wonderful, very real people and very relatable. Every podcast feels like I'm sitting down with friends. I hope our paths cross in the real world someday. Until then, their podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook feeds will have to do.
I love that. That is fantastic.
So sweet. So,
and that's from Cubs Fan New Jersey or Cubs Fan NJ.
So whoever you are, thank you. Although we think we know who it is, we just want to say thank you.
And if you haven't already, head over there, give us a rating and review. It does help us get discovered because the algorithm needs recent reviews and all that. So you're really helping us out. Please consider doing so. And we cannot thank you enough if you head over and give us that rating and review. That would be awesome.
That's going to do it for another episode of the Run Eat Drink podcast. We thank you for joining us on your long run, your commute to work, around the house, wherever you are. I'm your host, Amy.
And I'm your co-host, Dana.
Stay safe, stay well, and we will accomplish, explore, and indulge with you really soon. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Run, Eat, Drink podcast. We're having another great year thanks to your support. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're at Run, Eat, Drink Podcast. And on Twitter, we're Run, Eat, Drink Pod. You can also give us a call at 941-677-2733 or send us an email at info@runeatdrink.net. Visit our website at runeatdrink.net and click on the subscribe link so you don't miss a minute. Find out how you can support the show at patreon.com/runeatdrinkpodcast. Accomplish, explore, and indulge right along with us. We'll talk to you next time.